Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. We are right at 6:31, I believe, and we're going to get started. I'm going to call to order the Board of Directors meeting of October 15th, 2025. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, everyone, for that. We're going to go into roll call. Ms. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. All right, here we go. Adams County, Julie Duran-Mullica. Kathy Henson, Adams County. Jeff Baker, Arapahoe County.
Here.
Claire Levy, Boulder County. Ashley Stolzman, Boulder County. Austin Ward, Sidding County, Broomfield.
Here.
Rebecca Lloyd, Clear Creek County. Jody Hartman Ball, Clear Creek County. Adam Paul, Denver. Kevin Flynn, Denver. Here. Kevin Van Winkle, Douglas County. Abe Layden, Douglas County. Susan Berriman, Gilpin County. Andy Kerr, Jefferson County. Oh, yeah, okay, okay. Here we go. Sorry, I move a little fast. Sharon Davis, Arvada. Allison Coombs, Aurora. Larry Vidham, Bennett. Roy Spindell, Bennett. David Spellman, Blackhawk. Nicole Spear, Boulder.
Here.
Ryan Schuhard, Boulder.
Here.
Thank you so much. Greg Mills, Brighton.
E-Town in the house.
There it is. Deborah Mulvey, Castle Pines. I was like, I know Deb's here. Oh, there you are. Hi. I know, it's okay. I got you. Jason Gray, Castle Rock. Tim Dietz, Castle Rock. Tammy Maurer, Centennial. Zane Plasek, Central City. Robert Eber, Cherry Hills Village. Susan McGuire, Cherry Hills Village. Steve Douglas, Commerce City.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Rogers, Dacono. Adam Moorhead, Dacono. Steve Conklin, Edgewater.
Here.
Nathaniel Sierra, Inglewood. Kim Wright, Inglewood. Emily Bayer, Erie. Linda Montoya, Federal Heights. Sarah Dawn Pearlstein, Federal Heights. Ray Bird, Firestone. Don Cognac, Firestone. Josie Cockrell, Foxfield. Lisa Jones, Foxfield. Wendy Padilla, Frederick. Georgia Kofed, Georgetown. Rachel Binkley, Glendale. Ryan Toucher, Glendale. Lisa Vitry, Golden. George Lance, Greenwood Village. Chuck Harmon, Idaho Springs.
Here.
Brian Wong, Lafayette. Hello. Deslin Sherazai, Lakewood. Isabel Cruz, Lakewood. Isaac Levy, Larkspur. Stephen Barr, Littleton.
Here.
Kat Bristow, Lockbuoy. Larry Strock, Lockbuoy.
Here.
Marissa Harmon, Lone Tree. Alicia Brown, Lone Tree. See if I saw her online.
Present. Online.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Joan Peck, Longmont. Aaron Rodriguez, Longmont. Judy Kern, Louisville. L-Town in the house. Okay. Holly Rogan, Lions. Colleen Whitlow, Meade. Angela Bernhardt, Morrison. Here. Kathleen Bailey, Mountain View. Laura Dennis, Mountain View. Nicole Sterling, Netherland. Richard Kondo, North Glen.
Here.
John Dyack, Parker. Eric Franzen, Parker. Here. Terrence Kelly, Sheridan. Tara Biter-Fleur, Sheridan. Lee Bernardo, Silver Plume. Neil Shaw, Superior. Mike Foster, Superior. Here. Justin Martinez, Thornton. Here. Sarah Nermello, Westminster. Here. Bud Starker, Wheat Ridge. Darius Pakbaz, CDOT. Sally Chafee, CDOT. Bill Saroy, RTD. Here. All right, and with that, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I noticed there were some new names. If you're the first time here and you'd like to take a few minutes to introduce yourselves, is that okay? I believe it may.
Try this technology. Wow. Eric Franson, Town of Parker.
Hi, everyone. Joined the town council in Parker in January of this year, served through December of 2026, my term.
All right, excellent. Welcome. We appreciate it. Thank you. Is there anybody else brand new for the first time here? Okay, great. We're going to move on. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the evening.
Second.
Motion and multiple seconds, so we thank you for that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries and our agenda is approved. We do have a strategic informational briefing tonight from Front Range Passenger Rail. And Jacob Rieger, our Director of Transportation Planning and Operations, will be introducing this. And so, Jacob, floor is yours.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. Again, Jacob Rieger, Transportation Planning and Operations Director at DRCOG. As I always like to say, I have the easy job. I'm mostly introducing our speakers tonight, but I wanted to give a little context for this item. As you all mostly probably know directly and have seen in the news, there was a lot happening with rail projects in Colorado, particularly with Front Range Passenger Rail, as well as some other rail corridors. There's a lot of work going on by several parties, and there's a lot of work being done together by those folks. So we wanted to give you a briefing tonight, both specifically on Front Range Passenger Rail, as well as what's called joint service planning. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I do want to acknowledge our 4 members on the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board, representing the DRCOG Board, representing DRCOG, Director Numela, Director Peck, Director Mulvey, and then you're actually, as well as Director Levy, who is a governor's appointee to the Front Range Rail Board. But you're actually going to hear tonight from our 4th member, Director Chris Nevitt, a former director on our board, which is actually a provision in Senate Bill 238 that current and former board members can serve on the Front Range Rail District Board. So Chris Nevitt was on our board for many years and is now with the city of Denver, but he's actually the chair of the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board. He's here tonight to kick us off on presentation first on Front Range Rail, and then he's going to introduce folks who will talk about joint service planning efforts. So with that, let me turn it over to Chair Nevitt.
Thank you, Jacob. Really appreciate it. It's fun to be back here at DRCOG. I think the last time I was serving on DRCOG, we were still at the old building on Broadway and 13th, where, you know, strange people would claw on the windows and, yeah, so. Thank you. So I appreciate that introduction, and I did want to acknowledge my fellow appointees from DRCOG to the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board, Deborah Mulvey, Mayor Peck, Sarah Nurmela from Westminster, well, Claire Levy, despite having a DRCOG tattoo, is actually appointed by the governor to the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board. So you can ask her about that later. Front Range Passenger Rail, a new transportation option for Colorado's Front Range, except it's not a new transportation option. We used to have passenger rail running up and down the Front Range, and there are people, I think some people in this room have worked decades to bring it back. We're going to bring it back. Who is we? We're the Front Range Passenger Rail District. Over there on the right is a map. It's a little odd because it's a white screen and a light blue, powder blue map, but that's the Front Range Passenger Rail Special District. We are the largest special district in the history of Colorado. We were created by the state legislature in 21. and we are empowered to plan, finance, construct, and operate passenger rail up and down the Front Range. And the most important thing of all, we are empowered to put something on the ballot for a taxing measure to the citizens of the district. That is a difference between what we're doing and everything that has come before. Who is the Front Range Passenger Rail District? There are 10 members who are appointed by local communities. So as we talked about, DRCOG, the Pikes Peak COG, the Northern Front Range COG, which is mostly Larimer County, the Pueblo COG, and the Southern Front Range COG, which is Huerfano, Los Animas County. There are 6 appointees from the governor. CDOT has a seat, and we wanted to make sure that we had all the people that would be involved in making Front Range Passenger Rail happen at the table on the board. So we have actual seats for the Class 1 freight railroads, Amtrak, RTD, and New Mexico and Wyoming, which we intend to connect to. So that was the what, and the who, and the why, of course, is the pains we are enduring with our current one-dimensional intercity transportation strategy. At this point, the average Coloradan spends a day and a half stuck in traffic. And if I-25 is part of your transportation life, you know it's a whole lot more than that. The economic cost is substantial. I think a rough estimate is, $3.5 billion lost to our economy from people just sitting in their cars. The human toll is substantial, quite apart from the profound aggravation you experience in traffic. There is the lost wages, and then, of course, the wear and tear on vehicles and injuries and deaths from crashes. And none of this is going to get any better. Population is growing here. Colorado is a great place to live. We learned that early. Others are learning it late. They're coming to join us. And so we cannot build our way out of this, because we know that, and nobody knows this better than you, is that roadways are expensive to own and maintain, and roadways are extremely expensive to expand. Front Range Passenger Rail, having rail, is a diversification of our transportation portfolio. We can create a whole set of options, new options for people to travel without having to take a car. So right now, if you want to travel between our communities, you really only have one choice, and that is to drive. We think that is the opposite of freedom, and providing Front Range Rail is a way to provide people options, people who either don't want to drive or can't drive, to connect to business opportunities, to connect to new housing, new markets, specialized health care, higher education, special events, recreation, tourism, and to do it with safety, comfort, and convenience, the reliability of being able to arrive at your destination on schedule rather than having to calculate for traffic. The local economic impact is substantial. In my day job, I'm the TOD manager for the city of Denver, and I can tell you that the private investment that has followed the public investment in our rail stations is enormous. And then, of course, there are long, broad sustainability and overall system benefits, improved air quality, reduced pollution, fewer crashes, all the people who are on the trains, and slowing the growth of maintenance and roadway expansion costs as more people take the train. It's important to say that Front Range Passenger Rail is not local transit. So we have a statutory direction to provide rail connection between communities, not within communities, and to be competitive in travel time with the vehicle. We also need to maintain our FRA classification as intercity rail. But, and we believe this very strongly, passenger rail, Front Range Passenger Rail, intercity passenger rail is a force multiplier for local transit. So all the stations that connect the Front Range communities are themselves mobility hubs for local transit, so that the local transit system in Colorado Springs is integrated into the local transit system in Fort Collins, because you can travel between the two using Front Range passenger rail. So what is the FRPR program? So, I mean, I'll just put it to you bluntly. Our goal is not to bring the train to your grandchildren, it's to bring the train to you. And in order to do that, we need to be fast and we need to be cheap. And the way to do that is to use existing freight rail corridors rather than building whole new corridors, acquiring the land and building whole new corridors, and to use conventional rail technology. So the maximum speed operating with conventional rail on existing freight lines is 80 miles an hour. That's still pretty fast, but it's not California high-speed rail. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I don't want to be California high-speed rail. They've been just going in circles for years and years and years. Again, we want to deliver the train not to your grandchildren, but to you. Initially, we have 9 primary stations in the system between Fort Collins and Pueblo. We'll talk about this in a moment. We added 3 stations between Denver and Boulder as part of the joint startup service. And then we want to add Trinidad, and Trinidad is important because that's where the Southwest Chief comes, which connects to Chicago and Los Angeles. So not only are we connecting, using Front Range passenger rail to connect local transit systems, but we're also using Front Range passenger rail to connect to the whole nationwide Amtrak system. This will be delivered in phases over time, increasing in frequency and increasing in the quality of service, eventually connecting Wyoming and New Mexico. And startup service, again, more on this in a moment, can begin in 2029. So before this decade is out, but the full build out of Front Range passenger rail requires going to the voters and winning. So just a quick couple words on the service development plan. This is important. The service development plan, we've been working on this with our partners at CDOT and the freight railroads, and in collaboration with the FRA. This lays out all the components, the details of what's in the program, as well as the phasing for the program. What's the full build vision, and then the phases to get there. And most important, you have to have a service development plan in order to go for federal money. Now, federal money is not thick on the ground these days, but we think that will change. And when it does, we want to be ready. So we've been working on the service development plan, again, with our partners, and we expect it to have it in the can by the end of this year. This is an important slide. Well, I think it's important for DRCOG as well, that Front Range passenger rail is not just about Denver. It's about the entire Front Range. It's not just people coming in and out of Denver, commuting in and out of Denver. It's the entire Front Range. So, a little more than half of the estimated trips on Front Range passenger rail are indeed, their origin and destination will be Denver, but fully a third will be in the Northern Front Range, having nothing to do with Denver. And a sixth will be in the Southern Front Range, having nothing to do with Denver. This is providing transportation options throughout the Front Range, not just in and out of Denver. Joint startup service, and you'll be hearing a whole lot more on this topic from Lisa Kaufman. But just to tee it up, so under the leadership of the governor and supported by the state legislature, which created new fee revenue for this purpose, we are now in a partnership with CDOT and associated entities and RTD to deliver startup service between Denver and Fort Collins by 2029. We've already begun negotiations for access with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. They're the ones who control the freight railroad from Denver north. Union Pacific is a partner in the south, but we haven't gotten there yet. We'll develop a service plan, a financial plan, and we want to be able to get to the conclusion of that and start building stuff in 2026. The startup service will be 3 round trips between Denver and Fort Collins. It will be very bare bones. It'll be the minimum necessary. Again, we're trying to do this on the tightest budget possible using all existing revenue. So temporary platforms, the minimum number of sidings, et cetera. But again, financing this solely with existing revenues and delivering by 2029. This is kind of a busy slide, but this is sort of a comparison of the options. So you can see RTD's peak service proposition there. That was commuter rail. It was all 10 stops that were on the original Fast Tracks vision between Denver and Longmont. That was very Denver-centric, 3 trains coming in the morning, 3 trains going out in the evening. Denver was the focus. And that was going to be possible to deliver by 2050. Again, your grandkids will love it. You won't. Front Range Passenger Rail is, all the way, Fort Collins all the way down to Pueblo, fewer stops. But we have to win at the ballot to make it happen. Joint service is about using existing state revenue and RTD revenue to provide a hybrid of Front Range Passenger Rail, the first phase of Front Range Passenger Rail. So some additional stations added to the system, 3 true round trips. So in the morning, being able to get from Fort Collins to Denver, Denver to Fort Collins, afternoon, evening, so true round trips, not just coming into Denver in the morning and leaving in the evening, and a total of 8 stops between Denver and Fort Collins. Now, this is really kind of just summarizing what I've said, and I want to get to Lisa Kaufman in the state to tell you more about joint service, but no presentation on passenger rail is complete without a picture of a happy family enjoying their trip on the train. So we are here to create new options for connectivity to businesses, healthcare, education, et cetera, safe, convenient, reliable travel, more personal time, more productivity, mitigating traffic congestion, reducing maintenance and long-term infrastructure costs, stimulating local economic development, and supporting and enhancing local transit networks. So that's what we're up to. Rieger.
Thank you, Chris Nevitt, for that presentation on Front Range Rail. We're going to switch presentations, and the second twin presentation to this is from Lisa Kaufman from the Governor's Office regarding joint service planning.
How do I switch? Okay. Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Lisa Kaufman, and I just saw my mayor when I was walking up, so now I'm a little nervous because she's the most important mayor. But I'm Lisa Kaufman. I'm Senior Strategic Advisor to Governor Polis, was Chief of Staff for the first 4 years of his administration and Chief of Staff in the Congressional Office before then. So have worked alongside of Governor Polis for a very long time. And I'm lucky to work with Brandon Schaefer, who's sitting in the back with me, who's Special Advisor on Passenger Rail. on my team, and we are basically a team of two. We have a suite of projects, and I'll mostly focus on joint service tonight, and I apologize, I have a different slide deck that is just for joint service, so I'm going to have to skip around a little bit of what's in here, but some of our projects that we are working on include the Mountain Rail project, which is Denver to Winter Park to Steamboat Springs on to Craig and Hayden. Part of that has been renegotiating with Union Pacific for the Moffett Tunnel. So we had a 99-year lease with Union Pacific with the Moffett Tunnel, and that lease expired January 5th of 2025, which was very fortuitous for us to be able to broker a new passenger rail access agreement for Mountain Rail, where we did essentially a cashless exchange with them, where we as a state are being paid for their use of the Moffett Tunnel by getting access for free from Denver to Winter Park onto Craig and Hayden and Steamboat Springs for up to 3 daily round trips a day for 25 years. And then we also still have Union Pacific pays the state and maintains all of the tunnel. So they do the operation and maintenance, the emergency response, everything that goes into keeping the Moffett Tunnel, which is now, over 100 years old, operational. So that is a very expensive endeavor that they continue to cover. And we were able to secure this access agreement in 4 months. Usually access agreements take 2 to 5 years. And so that was a big win for the state of Colorado. We are currently in negotiations with Amtrak for the first segment, which will be Denver to Granby, year-round daily service by November of 2026. So just a little over a year, we'll have daily year-round service to Granby. And then we are working on the procurement for the other 2 round trips for the rest of the pattern of Mountain Rail. We got a pretty comprehensive access agreement that allows for many flexible delivery models for that service. So we tend to go out for procurement for those segments by the end of the year. And then joint service that I want to focus on today is, as Chair Nevitt talked about, is the starter service that begins realizing the full vision for Front Range passenger rail. But it's important to note at the onset that the governor is committed to the full vision of Front Range passenger rail, which is from Fort Collins to Trinidad, and that I think currently the modeling is telling us that there's at least a demand in the north for 10 daily round trips, potentially more, and that is a frequency we definitely want to fund and get to. But we are focused also on joint service, which is the starter service that is designed to be the starter service to be built upon. And so we're designing it to be compatible with Front Range passenger rail, beneficial to Front Range passenger rail, but is using existing resources and trying to bring it to market as fast as possible, because we know that currently voters are deeply skeptical of making investments in large passenger rail projects, given the impression of high-speed rail in California, and that hangs a shadow over our projects, even though they couldn't be more different, and then the unfinished fast tracks commitment in Northwest Rail. This is a map of the 2 rail projects that we are focused on, and you can see how, once we are complete, how large parts of the state will be connected after joint service, and Mountain Rail is locked in under this governor's watch. I'm gonna talk briefly about these slides, but try to get them quickly. So challenges. CDOT has over 3,500 employees. Exactly 5 of them work on rail, so not a huge focus of the Department of Transportation. Voters are skeptical of big rail projects, including our unfinished fast tracks commitments. We have multiple public agencies that are charged with delivering rail projects and independent boards, so it is hard to get all on the same page and row in the same direction. And then the state of Colorado has some also peculiarities in state law around indemnification and insurance that makes getting an access agreement with the Class 1s near impossible without having Amtrak at the table to help provide some of the liability that they have backed by Congress. And then, of course, voters have been skeptical of increasing taxes at the ballot for lots of different reasons, transportation being one of them, have gone and failed in the past. I think the opportunities that present itself is the governor and the General Assembly have been leaning into transit and rail expansion, and they created 2 new revenue sources in SB 24-184 and SB 230, creating a new daily rental car fee and then a new extraction fee on oil and gas activities that was supported by the oil and gas industry when we passed that bill. And then what we're seeing in polling in just the last year, I've never seen trends like this before, is that the voters are saying that they would like to see policymakers prioritize expansion of public transportation, trains, light rail, and bus options over roads. I'm going to skip over mountain rail so we can get to joint service. So joint service, as I said, is an ongoing effort by all of the public entities that had been looking at creating rail on BNSF's line from Denver to Fort Collins to collaborate to see if we can get service going with existing resources. So what we know is no one agency currently can deliver this project in the near term, but collaborating together using existing investments in infrastructure and studies, we believe that we can bring service by 2029 and do it in a cost-efficient way that is mutually beneficial to the eventual Front Range passenger rail investments that they will need to make for the full build-out. So a little bit more on these revenue sources. So in 2024, the legislature created a new $3 fee on all rental cars that is adjusted with inflation. So in budget year 26, that is projected to bring in $57 million, but then it grows to $110 million by 2050. Obviously, we believe costs can continue to grow with inflation, so it's important as we're mapping resources to look at not just do we have enough resources today to run the service, but do we project to have enough resources for the lifetime of the project. And then, of course, 184 directed RTD and CDOT and FRPRD to work together to stand up a service for one operator, one access agreement with the lowest cost option for infrastructure. SB 230, this was the new fee on oil and gas. It's projected to bring in $116 million in its first full year. It doesn't have a full year because the Clean Transit Enterprise had an artificial cap until 26, so that's why you see those numbers. And the lion's share of this money will likely go to RTD because 70% of it was to go out to local transit agencies through a formula to support expanding service. 10% is set aside for transformational one-time grants, and then 20% is a set aside that calls out prioritizing completion of the N line and completion of Northwest Rail. That was a very important addition to this bill brought to us by our Senator Kyle Mullica, who has been a great champion for finishing the N line. This was the forecast that RTD presented to its board last year. I understand they presented last night. I haven't gotten a download yet on the new forecast, but as we were looking at all these revenue sources, we of course were looking at RTD's revenue in addition to the new state revenue and mapping where there might be potential. And so what we're looking at on the left-hand corner here is their current debt service. The blue bars are their operating expenses. The purple is their planned capital expenses. And the yellow is their planned transfers to reserves. The bottom bar is their overall reserve picture. So RTD has an annual operating budget around $900 million, and they have a reserve of around $900 million. So that's about 100% reserve that they have. And that is even after 5 years in this forecast. So they're in a very solid financial position than we've really ever seen RTD in the past. They had a really talented board chair in Eric Davison before the pandemic that partnered with General Manager Deborah Johnson to restructure a lot of their debts. And so they were able to lock in low interest rates before the pandemic and really put themselves on a financial healthy position. And that's what you see in these graphs right here. This actually, Chris Neva had a better slide where it was demonstrated
next to each other side by side. We just changed that. That was in the slide deck I thought I was presenting tonight. But as you can see, this is what was before joint service was RTD was planning for peak rail study, which was 3 in and 3 out. Front Range Passenger Rail has been planning for its full build out around 10 daily round trips. And what that has meant in the past is it would likely lead to both projects being more expensive because the Class 1 railroads do not want to have more than one public agency running passenger rail on their exact line, presenting more conflict with their freight business and resulting in more costs for the public agencies in infrastructure improvements and access fees, and probably every piece of the puzzle would have been more expensive had there been 2 projects planned for this line. So this is what the legislature saw when they came together and said, we're going to mandate that all the public agencies work together to form joint service to ensure that we only have one operator and one access agreement to make sure we're delivering in a cost-efficient manner passenger rail in the northern segment. So as I said, the legislature mandated a study to see if there was enough existing resources for a starter service. That was due to them on March 1st. It said that there is enough existing resources. Obviously, that's up to the governing boards to make that policy decision to appropriate those resources. But what transpired after the March 1st report was the entities getting together to formulate an interagency agreement that would form the joint entity. And that is the joint EOC that now governs this project. All of the boards adopted that by the end of June of 2025. And we began negotiations with BNSF in August. I was the lead negotiator for the access agreement for Mountain Rail, and our colleagues selected me to be the lead negotiator for this access agreement now. So as Chris Nevitt said, we're currently in negotiations with BNSF. We're working really hard to get to a term sheet agreement by December and hopefully an underlying agreement by January, which is an aggressive timeline, as my friends at BNSF tell me, but we know so much about this corridor because it's been studied for 20 plus years. So it's doable. It's just a lot of work to get there. So going back to this slide, what that means is if we get an agreement with BNSF, the agreement would have what's the capital projects needed to support the characteristics of service, what are the characteristics of service that will be the project. As Chris Nevitt said, it's 3 daily round trips, but what's the top speed, where are the stops, and what is the initial schedule, and then what is the vehicle strategy supporting that schedule. And then we'd have the project list that would then emanate from those characteristics of service, and we would have costs associated with insurance and indemnification. What we would not have directly from the source by January is what's the cost from the operator, Amtrak, and we won't have, I think that's the only thing we won't have by January is the track from Amtrak, but we will have benchmarks around that. We already have a benchmark study around that, and we'll have Mountain Rail costs by then, so we'll be able to have a good line of sight into the full cost picture by January. The key takeaways, the state is taking an innovative approach to starter service to get passenger rail on the northern segment, but also Mountain Rail. And we are deeply supportive of the eventual Front Range Passenger Rail and realizing the full vision, as there's not a way to meet our climate goals as a state without seeing significant mode shift both through rail and buses and through TOD. And the reality is that rail will drive more TOD and permanent investments than we see from bus. So we take an all of the above approach of supporting bus and rail and biking and more pedestrian access. And that was really, I think, demonstrated in 230 that funds kind of the whole suite of multimodal activities in 230. So challenges ahead. We still have to get appropriations through all the governing boards by winter of 26, and we need to complete the access agreement successfully. Want me to take questions? And then All right, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, just in closing, I want to thank both Lisa Kaufman and Chris Nevitt for presenting tonight, and Chair, happy to take questions.
Let's open this up. Questions? Okay, Director Mullica.
Hi. Yeah, quick question. So we do need a vote through the RTD board to approve this. How do we feel, like, do we feel like RTD is board to support this? In the end, they have a lot of asks and a lot of budget constraints going on across that they're dealing with right now. How confident are we that RTD is going to follow through?
I think some of that is hard to answer at this hour without having the full picture from what comes out of the access agreement. I think that, you know, as policymakers on that board, they're going to want to see the end result and what is the cost and kind of what did we get out of these negotiations. I'd say, you know, General Manager Deborah Johnson's been fully engaged. She's on my negotiating team at the table and spending a lot of time on this. So I feel good about her level of commitment. There is a lot of competing priorities, but we certainly think this is a worthy project because it's what the voters approved. And I think that what we see in our polling that's holding us back from a full vision of expansion of transit and rail for the state of Colorado is that voters are very skeptical that government can deliver big rail projects. And certainly I think Mountain Rail is going to help shore up some of their skepticism, but this project is really important. I also would say, I think what we are trying to do with this model is establish that the state of Colorado is a joint investor with RTD. And I think in order for us to kind of realize all of the needs in the metro area, the state is going to have to continue to be a partner, bringing expertise and being a joint investor in not just finishing rail to Longmont and Boulder and now up to Fort Collins, but all the rest of the unfinished fast tracks projects. And so I think if this administration stands ready and willing to be a problem solver, innovate with RTD to get all of the projects done.
Director Nurmela, then Director Mills.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Lisa, I was just wondering, so I'm going to speak not as a board, as a Front Range Passenger Rail Board member, but just as from the City of Westminster's perspective. I know that you've probably heard this in other forums as well, that the cities that are along this portion of the line for joint service are eager to work with the state to have some input on the station and the station development. I'm a little concerned to see that we have an access and construction agreement that needs to be finalized by December and January, and we haven't had the opportunity to engage at the city or staff level to discuss the station opportunities. And you know, when we talk about TOD, one of our TOD areas, which is currently the potential station identified, doesn't have Excel power, and so we've had to actually stop building in that area, and we have an area that has a lot more density and opportunity for growth that we've identified, and was one of the stations. So we'd love to be able to, again, engage with the state before things are finalized so that we can provide that input.
Yeah, I think what's important on this front is to understand that the state and joint service, we're not painting with a free hand on station development. It's really going to be what can we get with BNSF and where are they willing to let us put stations. In addition to the lowest cost option in order to actually get this service with existing resources. And so those are going to be the guideposts. And we actually just got today a document from BNSF on kind of their station development criteria. So I think that maybe this has been a miss in some of the station development conversations to date, is that this is really their property and they are going to allow us to pay them to get access to it. And so it's really important to understand what's their criteria, where are they willing to contemplate stations, and how do we achieve our goals within those confines, and can we achieve those goals within that confine? And I think we learn every day how constraining or not those confines are with our partners at the Class 1s. And so we are probably going to be to a place over the next month to be able to have those conversations with locals with knowledge of where BN's concerns are and what they want to see. But it's hard to have those conversations without knowing where the actual parameters for us to be able to say to the locals, here's what is possible. And so we've been on, this conversation with them only since August. The joint committee was just formed really beginning of August, and we had our first conversation with BN in all seriousness about where we want to go with this August 18th. So we're not, behind, I think, in engaging locals, because it would be hard to tell you where we can or can't go until we get kind of a lay of the land from the Class 1s on how they're willing to approach this hybrid approach of joint service. And we're learning every day where they're at on that. And, we're getting very close to be able to go out to locals with what we know and with a technical analysis of what lowest cost options look like.
Director Mills, then Director Ward.
Thank you. I got about 3 different questions. One,
Actually, can you hold on just a second? I just wanted to add something to what Lisa was saying, which is, again, the joint startup service is trying to do it as fast as possible, as cheap as possible with the existing resources. The Front Range passenger rail enterprise is a longer-term enterprise. When we win at the ballot, we'll be able to take more time, work more closely with local jurisdictions, and build up to the kinds of stations that we all really want. So, the joint service, we're talking about temporary platforms, temporary low platforms on the main line, like right where the trains are running. And in the future, the stations will be on sidings, there'll be high platforms, level boarding, so you can roll on and off, but all that has to be worked out with the freights because, again, we're operating on their property, and that will take some time, and not to mention money. And the joint service enterprise is a different enterprise, trying to get that service started as fastly, is that a word? Fast and cheap as possible.
Although I would add to that, if you really want to get into the technical details of these, at 718 or whatever that we're at, is even that's going to be a really heavy negotiated, contentious point with the Class 1s. And, Colorado might be the first guinea pig to have to go, because the FRA, at least the previous administration's FRA, has said, they'd like new passenger rail to have passenger-only sidings with level boarding. The Class 1s have said no. So there will be some future negotiation around that, and joint service certainly doesn't have the buying power to overcome that very strong held no. Right.
Thank you, Director Mills.
thank you. Thank you both for your presentation. I appreciate your preparation in this. First of all, are these diesel or electric trains? I'm guessing diesel, given you'd have to build out the electric infrastructure. Is that right?
No, train technology is rapidly evolving, and the previous federal administration making so much investments in it really spurred kind of a new wave of technology being built in America even. And so we certainly hope that it would at least be hybrid trains, but that is a kind of future decision once we go out to procurement. But I would say mountain rail is going to start off with diesel because it's starting next year, and a procurement could take a year, and then it takes about 5 years for them to actually build your train set. Depending if you could tack on to other options that exist, then that could be faster. But yeah, it's not determined yet. I mean, it certainly is the governor's hope that we would at least move to lower emission vehicles and hybrid.
Yeah, but it's not like when you go out to DC and you have these electric metros that are going up and down. I mean, it's actually the passenger rails that are diesel that you see in the neighboring states, like in New Mexico and Utah. So.
Well, if, I don't know if you want me to get too into the weeds, but Stadler Rail, which is out of Salt Lake City, is pioneering some really interesting technology where they have train sets where they can switch battery pack, they can be on catenaries, and they can do 2 different technologies on the same run. And they have a hydrogen train that Caltrain just brought online for the first time. So it's been approved by the FRA and is now in revenue service in Caltrain. And that, I would say, the governor and I got an opportunity to ride that Caltrain when they were still building it in Switzerland, and we're blown away by it because it is like going from standing next to a diesel train to a Prius. It is silent, it vaporizes water, the vibration is not really anything like a diesel train. It's very low impact. Now, we have a lot of tunnels on mountain rails, so hydrogen's probably not an option until the FRA gets comfortable with that, which they're not currently, but it could be a possibility for Front Range.
Exciting to see what happens. Okay, next, you said it would be in, and Chris said this, it would be in phases. How many phases are we going? It sounds like the first phase is Denver to Fort Collins. What's phase 2? Are we 8 phases? How many phases are we looking at?
So this is being wrapped up in the service development plan. So phase 1 is 3 round trips between Denver and Fort Collins. I'm trying to remember exactly how all this fits together. We wanted to start revenue service to the south as quickly as possible. So I think the next phase is getting to Colorado Springs. A lot of service or a lot of demand is in the Northwest. So increasing service in the Northwest and then pushing service all the way south to Pueblo. So there's a slide that I didn't bring with me, but I could show you what's in the service development plan as the phases and the price tags for those phases.
Sounds like 3 phases so far in at least the Front Range side of it, so got it. And this is just a comment. This is going to be a hard sell given we've had a bad taste in our mouth with fast tracks for a couple decades now. So I'm not going to tell you how I feel exactly towards this, but I think it's just going to be a hard sell to the voters based on the experience voters have had with fast tracks.
We need to exercise the ghost of the ghost train.
Thank you, Director Mills. Director Ward?
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, I mean, really it's geared at both joint service and Front Range passenger rail, but when we are having conversations with RTD specifically for joint service, but also the other public transit agencies across the Front Range Passenger Rail District, Transport, Colt, Mountain Metro, Pueblo Transit, or I should say, are we having any conversations with them about changes to their service patterns so that way local public transit is servicing this train and people can get from the train station to other areas, particularly more east-west connections and even some north-south connections that, quite frankly, RTD still has not, probably will not implement. Because no one's gonna, I mean, if I'm thinking about, you know, Brighton, there's no easy way to connect with this train in any way, shape, or form. I think about the same thing with Golden, where let's take a 40-minute train ride into downtown just to go north. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. I get what you're saying, and it's probably a little premature to be talking in detail. I will say, number one, the governor and the state legislature established that new fee revenue, and a lot of it can go to RTD to start building up RTD service that could connect to joint service and then Front Range passenger rail. But also, you know, when I said in that slide that we believe ourselves to be a force multiplier for local transit, not just in the DRCOG or RTD region, but throughout the whole stretch of the system from Trinidad to Fort Collins, we don't have this nailed down yet, but our intention is to actually share revenue. with local jurisdictions so that they can make their own choices about how best to take advantage of front range passenger rail. Like, what is the best way for Pueblo to take advantage of front range passenger rail stopping at the old Union Depot? What is the best way for Westminster to take advantage of front range passenger rail? Are these, are there infrastructure problems that they need to solve? Are there affordable housing investments that they want to make to put near transit? Are there transit enhancements that would be necessary that take money to better connect to the front range passenger rail when that service starts? I think that's, nobody knows their communities better than the local communities. And so we want to partner not just in delivering the train, but actually helping finance what local jurisdictions need to do to take maximum advantage of what we're delivering.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear.
I would just add to that, everything Chris said, but I think it's a sequencing and timing on when those conversations happening. So with Mountain Rail starting next November, we've been in those conversations with the communities along the first segment, and we're partnering with the lift system in Grand County so that we are timing when they are servicing the Granby train station and then working with them to deploy the $230 so that they're expanding their bus service into Rocky Mountain National Park, into Grand Lake from that train station to build that connectivity regionally there.
Wonderful. My next question relates to the joint service agreement, the access agreement that you're negotiating with BNSF particularly. Have you made any contingencies if you were not able to deliver on the timeline in terms of that access agreement? Obviously, Mountain Rail, you had a very important asset for Union Pacific to continue running trains. That was a key leveraging piece, whereas with this line, as far as I'm aware, the state of Colorado does not own or have any stake in any major piece of infrastructure that can move the freight railroads faster than they normally like to move.
It is a great question, and the timeline is extremely aggressive, as they tell me every meeting. What I would say is that when we met for the first time on August 18th and told them that I would like an access agreement by January 1, they told me that wasn't really possible, and they don't move that fast. But then they called me back the next week and said, we hear you, and we're hiring outside counsel to try to meet your timeline. And then they did. And so they've added capacity since we've started negotiations so that they can move at a faster pace, but it's an aggressive timeline. But I think that the people of the Northwest corridor have waited long enough, and now is the time to get this done. And I think they see that the state of Colorado is trying to be a good partner to them by working all together and have one access agreement, one operator, which is to their benefit to minimize conflict with freight.
Okay. And then my final question is continuing on that access agreement. Since we want to ensure that there is only, or BNSF, I should say, only wants to deal with one person, and there are 3 entities that would like to have their hands in the cookie jar. When it comes to Northwest Rail in particular, and RTD's obligation under state law to develop a plan as to how to fulfill that promise it made to the voters, how does this access agreement either leave open the door for future expansion or contemplated in this current access agreement?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that currently RTD believes that fulfilling its commitment to the voters would be peak rail. That's what they've shifted several years ago to only studying 3 in and 3 out. As the author of the amendment you're talking about, I think that there's probably cleanup legislation coming for that, because I think it's not clear that that really the intent was to say that any service that is starting on this line is fulfilling that commitment to the voters. And the contemplation in the access agreement is really establishing the process for which you would add frequency. So we all know if you try to add frequency in year 32, then we would be modeling based off of the freight traffic and the passenger rail traffic in the previous 2 years. If we try to add new frequency, because new resources don't become available until 2050, then that's going to look completely different from what kind of infrastructure you need to support that increased frequency. So I think what the expectation would be, and this is certainly what it looks like in Mountain Rail for increased frequency, is an agreed upon process that you would go upon to negotiate the increased frequency, which would inherently, include a new RTC model.
My only comment is, I think it should be the voters who decide if 3 round trips during peak hour service for RTD is fulfilling the commitment they made, and not RTD or the state legislature mandating it. Thank you.
All right, Director Bear is next, and then Director Flynn.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for the presentation. I'm lucky enough to get quite a few updates over the months about Front Range Passenger Rail, and appreciate how much just the monumental effort that has gone into this. We're so much farther along than we were. We still have so far to go, but appreciate all the effort. So my question is about sort of exercising those demons, building trust among voters who will ultimately have to vote for a tax increase, and keeping promises, specifically about Senate Bill 230, that is a per barrel fee on oil and gas development, which disproportionately impacts just a certain region of the state, including my constituents in Erie. And we were carved out of the service area for Front Range Passenger Rail, which so I arrive at all the tables just advocating for our eventual 80,000 residents to be able to access the service in the surrounding communities. And Erie is very supportive of Front Range Passenger Rail. So I guess along those lines and those thoughts, completing the end line, what's the timing on that? And are you looking at that through the lens of being able to sort of keep promises and build trust in order to move forward with Front Range Passenger Rail?
Yeah, I think the end line is obviously a very important project, as the other remaining fast tracks projects are, and there is now that dedicated revenue source. And so in all of our modeling, we are not touching half of that money so that it continues accumulating for the end line. I think that where we need to get to is a true cost estimate. I know there was just a report that came out. I'm not sure that's that grounded in this is definitely how much the end line's going to cost. And I think that's kind of step one, is to really understand what's the scope of the cost and how can we tackle it, but certainly believe that it is a project that we need to complete.
And so I remember being in a meeting or a presentation, and you discussed maybe standing up a working group to discuss the completion of end line. Is that in the works, or?
Yeah, we are still very open to starting a working group. I think we need some local leadership on it so that it's kind of a joint effort. So if you want to co-chair a working group on the end line, I'm happy to help, or Commissioner Mullica too, because I think that's what we need, is some of the locals to start convening and saying, we're going to do this. And we would be willing partners in that, and certainly believe it needs to get done.
Great, thank you.
Director Flynn?
Thank you. With the low budget, low cost, or basic approach you're using for the starter service in 29, how do you comply without level boarding? How do you comply with ADA requirements with trackside boarding? And have you quantified the number of at-grade road crossings that would have to be hardened or maybe made quiet zones? Or is there a cost estimate to that just for the starter service? Because I can't imagine maintaining 79 miles an hour through, 58 at-grade crossings or whatever there are. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. So for the level boarding, there is now train sets that have kind of the ability to do level boarding and low level boarding, particularly the Arrow that is just coming online for the Cascade service. And that's a big order that Amtrak has that we may be able to exercise options to tag on to, shall we want to. So some of the technology has really helped on the ADA compliance, and certainly we would design a system to be ADA compliant. On the at-grade crossings, that is part of the conversation with BN, and part of the service development plan is identifying the at-grade crossings that would need to be a part of the initial starter service, or that the at-grade crossings that would need to be fixed as we add frequency. In 2024, we got a CRISI grant in September of 24 that started tackling some of those at-grade crossings on the northern corridor. And so the initial design is funded through that grant to start tackling some of those. I think that grant had 3 or 4 in it. Oh, on the corridor, no, but I think our approach would be that not all at-grade crossings are necessarily going to need improvements, but there are certainly some that we've identified as needing improvements.
All right, thank you for your presentation this evening. Jacob, do you want to close us out, or?
Yeah.
This is going to generate a lot of discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, both to our presenters and for the great conversation. Just if, later, if there are follow-up questions, both folks would be available. You could reach out to them directly. I can help you do that. So thank you.
All right, we'll be moving on to item number 6. This is report of the chair. I have nothing to report. So report of the Performance and Engagement Committee, Director Kondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Performance and Engagement Committee met this evening, and among other things, we did a debrief of the awards ceremony. Heard earlier in the fall, or actually late summer, I guess, if you want to call it that. And by all indications, it was a very successful event. And again, I do want to acknowledge the DRCOG staff that supported that event. I think it was really an enjoyable evening and would not be possible without their involvement. Second of all, the only action item is that we have voted on our representative for the nominating committee, and that would be Director Deborah Mulvey. So congratulations, Director Mulvey. And lastly, we are having obviously some conversations, given that there's some changes with our meeting schedule. Many of our meetings will be converting to virtual, but obviously we need to work on Executive Director Rex's performance evaluation. So for the Performance and Engagement Committee members, stand by for that. Figure out a time when we can get together in person. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Director Kondo. Report of the Finance and Budget Committee, and this will be Executive Director Rex.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The regular chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, Director Sherzai, she's unfortunate she couldn't be here this evening, so she asked me to give the report. Just a few things. We also, the Finance and Budget Committee, selected their member to the nominating committee, as the board will do later on tonight. And it was Director Sharon Davis. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve on the nominating committee. Appreciate you. A couple other things of note, a couple contracts that gave me authority to execute was with Fair and Peers for the DRCOG's Fitzsimmons Innovative Transportation Solution Study, and contract with MGM Innovations to provide call center services over in the AAA at the Choice Services Transportation Program. And lastly, the information item, we had a discussion with the Finance and Budget Committee to talk about contract thresholds requiring Finance and Budget Committee approval. That's currently $75,000, and we talked about increasing that to something, has been changed in a number of years. We're looking at $250,000 that we're bringing back to the committee at the next meeting. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rex. And I will just urge anybody that hasn't done it so far, we have extended the survey in order to give feedback towards Executive Director Rex's performance evaluation. If you have not yet had a chance to do that, please go ahead, take the 5 to 10 minutes that we would really appreciate that. Next will be Executive Director Rex report.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again. Appreciate it, and great seeing everyone this evening. A few things, I'll cut this short, and I know we're a little bit over time, but I did want to point out a couple things. First of all, the upcoming meeting schedule, you may notice on Channel 4. On page 4 of your packet, you might notice some differences in this. So first of all, I shouldn't say that. So we're having a special meeting of the board to replace your regular November 19th business meeting. So the special meeting will occur on November 5th. And the reason we're doing that is it's the same week as NLC, and I know there's a good portion of the members here tonight that are planning on attending NLC. So we're having a special meeting at the board work session meeting time virtually, okay? And then we are planning on having a December board work session, which is also virtual. And then December 17th business meeting, we are going to do that one virtual as well. Now, we have been doing that December meeting virtually out of COVID. It's close to the holidays and all that kind of good stuff. So this is our last meeting in person until January. So take that into consideration as we run late here tonight. That you won't have to see us all again until sometime in the future. All right, just a few things that I really wanted to bring to your attention. So first, on the carbon pollution reduction grants, or under the new name of Powerhead Colorado, this is just a final reminder of the jurisdictional subaward applications that are due on Halloween on October 31st. These are formula funds, and they range in value from $50,000 to $2 million based on size and projected growth within your jurisdictions. We're happy to meet with you or staff to have a further conversation about how you might be able to identify appropriate projects and create an application for this. It's important to note that new legislation requires new minimum energy code adoption on codes adopted after July 1st of 2026. Excuse me. So any municipality or county that's updating codes after that, they must comply, and this money can be used to help with some of that work. So if you have any questions, please just reach out to myself or Robert Spots. We'll be happy to direct you appropriately. We are expecting a deluge of applications to come in right at the last second. Most kind of like I was in college. So I have true appreciation for that. Powerhead Colorado Oversight Committee, we have a few changes of that I wanted to share with you all. So first of all, the chairman of that committee, which is Director Stephen Barr, is not running for re-election in Littleton, so his chairmanship is coming to an end on that committee. Also, Director Brian Wong is not running. Are you termed or not running? You're term limited, so he's not running again. So his time is ending on that committee too. So as a result, Vice Chair Kondo will become the new chair of the Oversight Committee, and Emily Baer is now an alternate on that committee, but she's very active. She'll become the member representing DRCOG on that. So thank you both for stepping up, and I also want to thank Stephen for your time, and Director Wong and you as well for your continued commitment to this project. Civic Academy, real quick, we kicked off our 2025 session. We have close to 40 participants across the region participating in this 7-week course. At the first meeting, I want to extend my special thank you to 3 members of the executive committee that were able to come and serve on a panel talking about regionalism. I know the other 2, Director Conklin and Director Kondo, wanted to attend but couldn't. But special thank you to the Chair Baker, Director Sherzai, and Director Whitlow for you attending that. Truly do appreciate it. All right. Last but not least, I wanted to just recognize some of the outgoing board members. I know we're in election season right now, and there's a number of you that are running again. But I did want to at least recognize and acknowledge the board members that are not running for re-election or are termed out, and so their time on this committee is ending. And I have a list here that I just jotted down, and I hope I'm not missing anybody, but I'm sure you'll raise your hand. So Mayor Bud Starker from Wheat Ridge, thank you, sir, very much. Stephen Barr, as I mentioned, from Littleton. Tammy Maurer from Centennial. She's termed. Director Wong, thank you, sir, for your time on the committee, and Mayor Joan Peck. I know she's not here tonight, but she's a long stalwart on this committee, and we're gonna miss you all so very much. I am deeply honored in your commitment to this, and choosing or being voluntold to come to DRCOG on the third Wednesday of every month. We truly do appreciate it. It's an honor to get to know each and every one of you. And I hope you learned something along the way, and I'm sure you gained a lot of friends and respect from your fellow, board members. So thank you all so very much. Did I miss anybody that's termed or not running? Okay, I just want to make sure. The rest of y'all, hang in there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my report.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item number 8, which is public comment. We've set aside 45 minutes for public comment, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. If there are additional requests from the public to address the board, we will allot time at the end of the meeting to complete public comment. I'm going to request that there be no public comment on issues for which a prior public hearing has been held before this board, and we will take on our consent and action items immediately after the last speaker. Is there anyone here in person that wants to address the board of directors for DRCOG? I'm not seeing anyone making themselves known. And I will ask Ms. Stevens if online. We don't have anyone online, so I will close public comment at this time. That will help us catch up. We'll move on to item number 9, which is the consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda: the summary of the August 2025 meeting, amendments to the 26-29 Transportation Improvement Program, and Transportation Demand Management Set Aside. Is there any director that would like to remove any of those from the consent agenda? I'm not seeing any. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
I move we approve the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Director Flynn and Director Davis. Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 10. This is the first of 2 action items. This is selection of a representative to the nominating committee that is this board's appointed director. Director Rex, Executive Director Rex will take the floor and tell us all about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And those that have been with us for some time now know the schedule that we're on with regards to the nominating committee. We're required by the articles to seat the nominating committee every year in November. Just because of our schedule this time around, we thought we'd go ahead and make those appointments in October so that we can begin those meetings in November. So there's 6 members of the nominating committee. Performance and Engagement Committee, as you heard tonight, as well as Finance and Budget Committee have already made their appointments. City, County of Denver also has a seat on the committee, as well as the immediate past chair, which is Director Steve Conklin. And then there's 2 others. The board itself gets a member on the committee, and the board chair also makes an appointment. So just as far as the responsibilities, just to refresh your memory, the purpose of the nominating committee is, it's threefold, really. So one, it's probably its primary duty is to make a recommendation of a slate of officers to serve on the executive committee in 2026, and those will be presented to the board in January and then ultimately voted on in February. There's also the responsibility of the nominating committee to recommend appointments to the Finance and Budget Committee and the Performance and Engagement Committee. And lastly, but certainly not least, is also they're responsible for making recommendations for the various regional committees that we have standing seats on, also like the State Transportation Advisory Committee, Front Range Passenger Rail District Board, just to name a few. So with that said, there's a couple caveats here for those that are interested in serving. One, you must have served on the board at least a year as a member or alternate. And the second caveat, that if you're interested in running for a board, an officer position, you cannot serve on the nominating committee this year. So with those caveats, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it back to you to see, if we have any interest.
Thank you very much. The board recognizes Director Cruz for purposes of a nomination.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Nicole Spear, Director Spear from the City of Boulder, who I believe has served on the committee for 2 years and would be a fit. So I'd like to.
Very much. Are there any other nominations? Not seeing any nominations. Online, are there any nominations? Seeing none? We need 6 people, but
We need one tonight.
One tonight, yeah. I would entertain a motion to close nominations and elect by acclamation Director Spear to the nominating committee. A motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Number of seconds? Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. Congratulations to Director Spear. All right. All right, our next item is item number 11. This is Transportation Improvement Program, Programming Year Adjustments. And we're going to hear from Jacob Rieger.
Thank you, Chair Baker, and good evening again. This item will be quite a bit shorter than the last time you saw me. This is actually Todd Cottrell's item. I gave him the night off, but I want to acknowledge his hard work of the team that manages our Transportation Improvement Program, Todd Cottrell, who leads it, Josh Swank and Brad Williams, who create, maintain, and update the Transportation Improvement Program. And we're going to talk about the road ahead on our next Transportation Improvement Program in this presentation. There we go. Okay, so we have been starting some conversations with you and with our Transportation Advisory Committee and others around kind of some potential adjustments that we're recommending this evening for our next 4-year Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. But a little bit of background here first. As you've heard us say more than once, the TIP implements our 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. That's actually federal law. The long-range plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, sets those strategic multimodal transportation priorities. And then the Transportation Improvement Program implements those priorities over time. And it's actually a federal requirement that in order to be eligible to compete for funding in the TIP, you need to be, as a major project, need to be listed in the fiscally constrained RTP. So these two documents really work together. Historically, we've had these documents, they work together also in terms of their adoption timelines. TIP funding is contingent on RTP adoption. Obviously, we want to get the plan done first, and then we sort of set those priorities and set the table for the Transportation Improvement Program. We find ourselves now, though, in a situation where right now our next Transportation Improvement Program potentially doesn't align with our Regional Transportation Plan that we're currently updating. The reason for that is because we adopted our 2050 RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, back in April of 2021, and then the state greenhouse gas rule came along that we needed to comply, and we comply actually through our RTP. So we needed to do a pretty significant update to the RTP by October 1st of 2022. That work, frankly, was so significant that the Federal Highway Administration counted that as another major update under federal law and reset our 4-year clock, so to speak, in terms of our federal requirement to update the plan every 4 years. So what would have been the 4 years of 21 through 25 now became kind of 22 through really 23 through 26, which bleeds into the next Transportation Improvement Program. So we're kind of trying to resolve that timing conflict. So to do that, we have two kind of one-time recommendations around the next TIP. We'd like to shift the next transportation improvement program from what would have been a 28 to 31 TIP to fiscal years 29 through 2032 to kind of resolve that timing issue that I spoke about. The benefit of this is it allows our current 2050 RTP, which we're currently updating. We're again doing that major update that we need to do every 4 years. That update will be completed. The plan, we will ask you for adoption of the updated 2050 RTP about this time next year in the fall of 2026. So we'll get the RTP done and get that completed before we begin calls on the next transportation improvement program. So if we do this, then a thumbnail sketch of what that would look like is that the new TIP timeline, we'd start next year with TIP policy discussions. What do we want the next TIP to kind of look like from a policy perspective? In 2027, after the plan is adopted, then we'd be in position to actually do our 4-year calls for projects. And then in 2028, we prepare the TIP document, have our public review, and then adopt the 29 through 32 TIP. So if we do that, that's great, but it does create the issue, what do we do with FY28, which becomes kind of that gap here between what would have been kind of the original TIP and the new TIP that we're recommending. So we have some specific kind of recommendations here regarding how we would program FY28 funding, and there's sort of 3 components. First is that, as you all know, the TIP includes the projects in the TIP that I've talked about, but also what we call TIP set-asides, which are funds kind of taken off the top that are dedicated to specific programs, specific projects or purposes. We would program those set-asides with 1 year of funding at current levels, which we estimate to be about $11.5 million, and those would be programmed through kind of our typical TIP set-aside calls. So that's the first thing. Second one is backfilling each federal funding source that we program in the TIP without involuntarily reducing or eliminating funding from existing projects. We think that's around $26 million. There's a long story behind that that I can get into if you have questions about it, but suffice it to say, we're all kind of in, sort of nationwide financial kind of choppy waters and have the need to make those financial adjustments in the TIP to close some of those gaps. And then finally, with the remaining FY28 dollars left over, that would be about $48 million. We would take those unallocated remaining funds and we would put them into the next TIP call for 2932. That actually has an advantage because we often find that in TIP calls, right, you all want to do your projects first. You want your project to be in the first year of the new TIP. So it would give us a little bit of extra funding maybe to accommodate some more projects once we get into that new TIP call. So with that was a little complicated, but hopefully I explained it in a way that would make sense. So the motion that we have before you that was unanimously approved by both our Transportation Advisory Committee and our Regional Transportation Committee, we're recommending to approve exceptions to our adopted policies for TIP program development documents to shift the future fiscal years 28 to 31 TIP to a 29 to 32 TIP, and to allocate the future fiscal year 2028 funding, as I noted in this presentation. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Director Mills.
Thank you. Does this delay any TIP funding that we've already discussed?
Short answer is no, it does not.
Okay. I mean, I'm a little wary before I vote on this. I'd like to actually consult some of my staff before actually seeing if it should be supported, or go through some of the other transportation regional efforts like NADA and stuff to see where they stand before I'm comfortable even supporting this or not.
Other questions? Director Mills, would that be, is that a form of a motion to table maybe? Is that what you're specifically?
Would that put you in a bind if we table this to the next business meeting? We have time to consult our staff and regional people.
Yeah, I think we'd be okay. I mean, we do want to sort of solidify this direction because, as I've outlined, there's initial steps we need to start taking. So I don't want to delay significantly, but I think if we did this at the next meeting, I think that would be okay.
Especially if the next business meeting is early November, virtually, we should be able to still go forward. Okay. I would like to make a motion to table this to the next business meeting, which is November Fifth?
Okay. So we have a motion to table until November 5th. Is there a second to that motion? We have a second. Further discussion? Anyone to give reasons to support or why they may not support or do support this motion?
Chairman, I just want to point out, I mean, listen, first of all, I have no issue with tabling this to November 5th. But I just want to make sure people understand that we're not just, this is not the first time you've seen this. That we, you know, I don't want you to think that we're just jumping this on you. This was the subject of a board work session, as well as maybe even the sub-regions have had conversations. I don't know. But I seriously have no concern about tabling this so that you can have individual conversations with your staff.
Which is really 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all.
Other discussion items or other discussion about this motion, which has been properly seconded? Okay, without that, I'm going to ask for a vote. Shall we do hands raised? Is that, or let's just do a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion does carry, and this is tabled until.
Sorry, really.
Oops, sorry.
Abstentions or?
Abstention from Aurora.
Thank you very much.
And, okay. All right. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to informational briefings. Thank you, Jacob. Again in 2 weeks. All right, informational briefings. Regional Transportation District Finishing Fast Tracks report. This is, I think everybody's had time to digest that report. We're going to be introduced by Jacob again for our very own Bill Saroy presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. This one I'm going to keep pretty brief. You all know about this. You know that RTD recently published a draft report addressing some state legislation that Bill is going to get into about finishing fast tracks. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Bill Saroy, the Senior Manager of Transit-Oriented Communities at RTD, to talk about this.
Thank you, Jacob. And first, I do want to start off by saying, just in terms of the presentation that we just heard, that there still is a lot of coordination that needs to happen. You'll see some different figures in our presentation, and I think it just speaks to the nature of the need for the partnership with the state. But I do think, again, we do need to kind of, I'll just be honest, it was my first time seeing some of the numbers that I saw today. So I just want to note that as kind of, as I start this. Okay. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So what I'm going to do is give a little bit of background. We've talked a lot about fast tracks tonight, on fast tracks and the context for where we're at today. I'll talk a little bit about our updated costs that we did both in the capital and operating side, and then talk about RTD's fiscal capacity, or the fiscal capacity to complete the program as we've defined it, and then some key takeaways, and then next steps. So background, obviously everybody knows that Fast Tracks was passed in 2004. We have actually completed a fair amount of it, about 75% of the program, but there are some remaining projects. As we all know, the Northwest Rail Peak Service, North Metro completion, Southwest, and the Central Corridor extensions. As we heard tonight, SB 24-230, which was passed in 2024, directed RTD to develop a report to see how the agency, or how we could finish fast tracks by 2034, with the idea that we would prioritize both Northwest Rail and North Metro. That was then added to in this past year's legislative session with SB 25-261, which directed RT to do some additional fiscal analysis as well as to do some a robust outreach process for the report. In terms of the report basis, in terms of where we started, we did do a report in 2019 at the direction of our board that really did kind of update where we were from the completion of the Fast Tracks program. That we used as a basis, and so we updated the capital and operating costs to reflect the inflation that we've seen between that when that report was published and today. We also updated the revenue projections based on our current fiscal state and the capacity in looking at additional resources outside of RTD. And then we also did have conversations with local staff about new infrastructure and development projects that may impact potential implementation of any of the projects. So a little bit, more about some of the challenges that we've seen with the program since 2004. Obviously, everybody remembers the Great Recession. And one of the things that did for us is it really put us in a different perspective in terms of our growth of our sales tax. We had projected about a 6.3% annual growth, which again was endorsed and approved by kind of the region. And then that growth rate really came down to about less than 5, about 4.9% that happened between 2008 and 2025. We also saw a tremendous spike in construction costs due to supply chain, due to disrupted labor markets, due to the influence of things like China, things that were going on in China. And so we had, we always call it the perfect storm where things were going in the wrong direction. So as everybody remembers, it was about 2007, 2008, that some of that information started to come to light. The things that have also happened, most recently with regards to COVID, we saw a tremendous impact to ridership. We are at about 60% of our ridership that we were at in 2019. So we've seen a tremendous impact just from the COVID and the travel patterns in the region, and particularly travel patterns downtown. So some of the things and one of the things I did want to point out with regards to the report basis, the one thing that we did not do is we did not update, do any additional design or analysis on any of the corridors. We basically took the costs as they were in the design that we had from that 2019 report and just escalated those costs. I wanted to make sure everybody understood that. The updated costs. So these costs reflect the updated costs. The other thing I want to say is that we did complete the Northwest Rail Peak Service Study in 2024, and those costs shown there do reflect those 2024 costs. The other 3 corridors were escalated. We did do kind of follow the FTA's construction cost methodology and updated those costs. Those costs actually increased anywhere from 70 to 90% between the 2015 basis and today, in 2024. So they a very, very significant increase, and we've seen that in other projects in terms of just the cost escalation. The operating costs, again, in round numbers, are about $23 million for all 4 corridors. And then you look at the ridership in terms of annual boardings, it's almost about 1.1 million per year. And then if you look at kind of the daily boardings, it's more around 3,600. Now, again, people might look at those numbers and say those are, disappointing. I think what that does reflect is a little bit of what I talked about in terms of where we're at on the rail side in terms of our ridership and what we've seen from COVID, but it does reflect kind of what we think is close to what we could expect on some of those corridors. So fiscal capacity, and again, this I think is where the conversation that we need to have with, with the joint service group and, others, and these do reflect our most recent projections for our 5-year fiscal forecast. So they are updated to reflect that. That conversation is currently going on with our board. So some of these assumptions are subject to change. We do have limited reserves. I know there was a discussion about those reserves. Those reserves, again, based on my understanding from our finance department, are committed to paying down our operating costs, which are escalating rapidly, as well as our debt service. We also have operating and capital costs, which are very specific to those requirements in terms of our fiscal policy. So there are really limited opportunities to use those reserve funds over the next 5 years. If you look at our debt, we, according to what was allowed in the Tabor, under Tabor as passed in 2004, we have about a little under $3 million left in our debt capacity, so very little amount of debt capacity left. Now that certainly could be changed with legislation, so we could look at doing that and changing that debt so that number could increase. We also were asked to look at certificates of participation, or COPs. My understanding from our finance group is there's limited ability to do that, again, because of our obligations for our operations and for our debt service, that again, we don't really have the ability to kind of pay off that additional debt that would be incurred by those COPs. And lastly, something that we are, incorporating or dealing with right now is our asset renewal needs, or our state of good repair needs. Many of you have seen kind of some of the, with our 30-year-old rail system, we're starting to have to replace track and other things. We will be having to replace vehicles here in the next 10 years. We also continually have to replace bus, so our asset renewal needs are only growing. And again, that's another constraint for us as an agency. But if you look at kind of additional revenue sources, both on the state, and we heard these, and again, these numbers, some of these numbers may be slightly different, or then we need to, this is where we need to have that additional coordination, because I do think there may be some different assumptions. But in terms of the 5-year fiscal forecast, our current projection based on our proposed 5-year fiscal forecast is that we would have about $145 million in 2030 that would be available to contribute to the project. We were asked, and it's part of the legislation, to look at the 21-260 funds, or the MMOF funds, and these are funded through COG, as most of you know. Our understanding in talking with COG staff that there's about $30 million available in the 2030 to 2032 timeframe. And then the SB 24-230, it's expected, again, our assumption is about $90 million a year statewide, that beginning in 2026, with about 20 of those being allocated for rail statewide, specifically more for rail projects. Now, certainly there's assumptions you can make associated with the additional monies, because a part of those monies, about 70%, goes to local operations. We have applied for some of those funds for this year, but there's a little bit amount of money this year. But we do expect, I think, in the order of about $40 million. But again, I think there was an assumption about $50 million, so we'll have to kind of look at that ongoing after this year. And then lastly, there's of that funding, there's about 10% that's available through a competitive grant program, which has not been fully defined yet in terms of what the requirements are for that. So we're kind of monitoring that. And then SB 24-184, again, they're starting out at about 58, a little less than 60 million, which is expected to grow over time. But we don't have an established funding mechanism, so we haven't seen anything that shows us how those are going to be distributed. Again, they're statewide funds. But again, so we had to look at that in terms of what could we assume that, would be a reasonable percentage of those funds that we could get over time. So also looking at federal funding, on the federal side, the traditional capital program that you have is the Capital Investment Grant Program. That is a program that we've taken a big advantage of at RTD with the Fast Tracks program. We've been able to garner about $1.4 billion of that program over the years since 2004. We have continued to analyze those funds based on the current criteria for the remaining Fast Tracks corridors. And it's our expectation that those projects are not going to be eligible for those funding. The criteria that they have is currently not conducive to any of the projects that are remaining. We did hear from the governor's representative today about the Chrissy grant that was received. That is, again, another opportunity. Again, there was a $66 million grant that was received for the corridor between Fort Collins and Denver. And then, the build funds, again, certainly that's a program that we know of. The State Highway 119 BRT project did receive some funds for that. And that's, looking at that, there's about an average of about a $15 million award per project, if you look at kind of how they've done. So the other thing to note about this, and I think we can all understand this, is the federal funding, there's a little bit of uncertainty with regards to that right now, particularly on the transit side. So, you know, with the potential reauthorization that's happening next year, again, we're continuing to monitor this, but again, it's a real challenge, I think, to make a lot of assumptions on the federal side at this point. So where does that get us? So, you know, based on some of our assumptions, we assume that there's about a $1.2 billion shortfall for all 4 projects. That assumes that $1.6 billion in cost and assumes some of those other funds that we've identified. Now, the thing I'll say about our costs and some of our revenues, our costs are a point in time. So those are 2024 costs. We do expect them to go up. That there will be continued escalation. If you look at year of expenditure, they are going to be higher than what we have said. But so our fundamental conclusion is there needs to be additional revenue sources beyond what we identified. And we need to work together. I mean, obviously, you've heard a lot about the working together from the Front Range Passenger Rail folks earlier in the Joint Service Agreement, which is a great start. And I think we need to sit down with them. And obviously, it's very clear between the 2 different conclusions in the presentations you heard tonight that we do need to work together on those, on moving the finishing fast tracks moving forward. So just a little bit of takeaways. Again, we've actually been able to complete a significant part of the program. We do think there are insufficient funds, at least currently from our analysis, to complete the project. There's additional design completed on all 4 corridors. You know, it's between 15 and 30% design complete, and many of those designs are 10 plus years old, so we do need to really look at those. And the cost estimates, like I said, are a snapshot in time, and we do expect those will change associated with design as we move forward. So then next steps, so we will be going to the Transportation Legislative Review Committee next month. We also have some other meetings, including going to NADA next week, as well as going to a community meeting and a few other meetings between now and mid-November. Then the comment period for the report will close in November, and then we do expect to submit the final report with the changes to the legislature before Thanksgiving. So, and then there is if folks have not seen it, there is the website to download the report or to look at the details of the report, so you can do that. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
All right, questions? Director Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just be quite frank. I was very disappointed in this. When RTD first received the requirement from the state legislature to do an analysis of what it would take to complete fast tracks, why did RTD make the decision that peak service on the Northwest Corridor was considered completing fast tracks? Why was that the assumption made?
What I'll say is that, one, I think, you know, we've done a lot of effort on that and starting from that as a baseline. I would say we haven't, in terms of completing fast tracks, I would look at it as a phased kind of project. I think we wanted to start with that and understand where we were kind of collectively with the whole fast tracks program, understanding that there had been a lot of conversation and discussion through the peak service study, that is kind of a basis that people wanted to move forward with the project.
Okay, that still doesn't address the fact that the legislation says you need to finish fast tracks, which finishing fast tracks means completing Northwest Rail as promised to the voters, which was 55 trains a day, but you have done no attempts in this document to even attempt to plan for it. And so how can you go to the state legislature and say, well, here's the cost for a project that we didn't promise fully to the voters? It's peak hour, peak service.
Again, what I would say is where we're at with this project. We wanted to understand and the significant gap that we would have had to do associated with looking at the full build out of Northwest Rail, I think would have been a huge challenge. Again, we wanted to start from a baseline to where we could go as an agency and where we can go as a region. And you know, certainly there is that conversation that can be had, but I think what we've determined is there is still a huge challenge just even assuming the peak service option.
Okay, when Patrick Stanley gave a presentation to the city and county of Broomfield a couple month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I forget, time blurs now. I asked him, does RTD have a commitment to finish Northwest Rail as promised? And to his indication, he said, yes, we do. But the reports that RTD keeps coming out with do not signify that they have that commitment. And you continue to lose trust with local governments, particularly along the Northwest Corridor. You continue to lose trust with voters in those corridors. This is not what this legislation asks for. Now, if the state wants to change that in the upcoming legislation, they can more than happy to try. But RTD is not showing any good faith in fulfilling its promises of fast tracks. When is RTD just going to come forward and say, we can't do it, we need to be released of this obligation? When are you going to have that conversation with the voters? Because right now you just keep leading us on for decades at this point.
I think the first point is we need to have a conversation about the peak service and then go on from there.
I'm done.
Director Nurmela.
I just want to support Director Ward in his question about how we can be more, and how RTD can be more transparent about whether you're able to actually finish that Northwest Rail component, or, corridor. And I think instead of blowing past the question about, will this ever be completed? No, we're just going to focus on this peak service. Really what people want to hear is, hey, this is how much it's really going to cost, and we can't afford it, but some level of accounting and a transparent conversation that's had where people can understand and see the issues. And then from there, have some conversation that is inclusive of having public and city and other input on, what the solution would be. But I think just kind of passing over it does not help create that trust and build that trust back. So, just thank you for hearing that.
Director Martinez.
Yeah, I'm interested in expanding on some of the figures that we got on the updated corridor cost slide, particularly the annual boardings horizon year of 2045. I can't tell if these are high or low, so could you provide some insight into how these numbers stack up against comparable services, or either within RTD or in other regions as well, just to give a better idea of, are these significant numbers, average, below average? It's hard to tell.
Yeah, so if you look at, within the report, we do have kind of identified some of the other fast track scores and what their current ridership is, and even go back historically what the projected ridership was when we initially did. So for context, like the A line right now is about an average daily boarding of about 15,500 is in terms of that. I believe the current North Metro line is around, if I'm right, around 4,400. And then in terms of the W line, I think that's more around 88,000 a day. So that can give you some context in terms of what some of those other fast track corridors are currently at in 2024.
Okay, now I'm really confused. You said, because these numbers for daily boardings are like 100 for North Metro, so you're saying
that's just for that segment, the new segment of North.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you would add that to the
okay.
Again, the 4,000, I believe that's sort of 3,500 that's in there today, and I can get you those numbers in the report. I just don't have them in front of me right now.
Okay, well, that makes a lot more sense, that they're like the marginal added boardings for the new builds. Thank you.
Director Pappas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the presentation. So you asked for some increased coordination with some of the partners on building this out. What type of coordination would you need to kind of continue with some of this, with some of these plans, with the state partners or the Front Range Passenger Rail?
I think one of the main things that we need to do is sit down and talk about the finances, and particularly finances assumed for RTD's contribution. My understanding, some high-level conversations have happened, but again, some of our numbers reflect our new five-year fiscal forecast and the challenging conversations we're having with our board right now about our budget. So I do think some of those are the conversations that we need to have.
Okay. I do want to note that for the amount for fiscal year 26, that amount did come out in March of last year, where we did note that we didn't have that $90 million available, and we did have the $56 million available for the oil and gas fee. Has RTD staff contacted the Clean Transit Enterprise in order to have those conversations, or has the Clean Transit Enterprise contacted RTD staff to have those conversations to start that?
Yes, we have.
Okay. All right. And the topic of finances did not come up?
Well, in our conversations, we've had conversations about the current NOFA that was out for this year, and then the potential NOFAs for 26 and 27.
Okay. And the same question applies to the Colorado Transportation Investment Office for the Senate Bill 184 fees. Has that kind of came up a little bit? Has that came up in terms of taking a look at the financial situation?
Well, and we haven't had direct conversations with the CTIOs, no.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
There is one other hand in the back. Okay. Oh, all right. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Soroy, and we'll move on to our next informational briefing. This is item number 13 on our agenda, multimodal supportive local development toolkit. We're going to hear from Cole Nieder, Senior Planner. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me this evening. My name is Cole Nieder. I am DRCOG Senior Transit Planner, and today I would like to present on a project we are currently working on, DRCOG's Multimodal Local Development Standards Toolkit, which at 8:30 p.m. at night is not the best title for a project like this, so we're going to call it Built to Move, which I think is much more. There we go. This is a quick agenda. I'm going to keep this short because we are a little bit over time this evening. We're going to do a project overview. This is a toolkit, so some of the components of this toolkit as well, some anticipated outcomes of this project and the processes that we're going through, project timeline, and then I do want to facilitate a little feedback from you guys and a little bit of discussion on what would make this toolkit most helpful for our local governments across the region. So as we all know, communities across our region are always working to make our communities safe and connected places, our developments safe and connected. And often that means our transportation and land use decisions, they must be coordinated together. These are decisions that are often made in silos. When these decisions are made in silos, we often have difficulty achieving multimodal and connected communities. I will give an example. So if you guys are biking, going on a train, or taking your car to a specific destination, let's say a strip mall, and you are going into the store, then you see across the street, it's about 50 yards away. You want to go to a different restaurant, grab a bite to eat. You have to then go out of, because of the development and land use characteristic of that area, you have to go out onto the street, make a U-turn in a specific area, come back all the way in, and then go to a different parking lot and park there. You can't just simply walk over, which makes that development not as efficient as we want it to be. So this is kind of a toolkit, and that's a very high-level example of what we're trying to address with this toolkit going forward, is kind of preventing that type of occurrence from happening with our new developments going forward. That leads us to many of the existing challenges that we see in our region with development today. That includes coordination challenges between land use and transportation topics, as well as a lack of regional, on our end, development design guidelines and guidance and standards for context-sensitive and applicable to context-sensitive developments applicable to urban, suburban, and also rural environments. And finally, to address these issues, and when we try to address them, governments at all levels often lack the capacity, the staff time, to study and adopt and implement best practices in land use and multimodal friendly approaches to our developments. And the Built to Move toolkit wants to address exactly these challenges by building local capacity and aligning land use and transportation efforts across our region. And so at a high level, our goals while creating this toolkit include providing clear and aligned guidance that strengthens multimodal accessibility through our local development standards. This means building capacity and understanding also within our own agency, DRCOG, on development and design best practices, as well as a better understanding of our current development conditions across the region. So this project is going to tackle all of those components. And so to achieve this, a major part of this project, which we're kind of starting with today, will include ongoing engagement with local communities, local staff, in order to create a toolkit that's relevant and useful for them to use and for our staff to use in the real world. So what specific components of this toolkit do we want to include to achieve these goals and outcomes? So an important starting point for this toolkit will be establishing a different typology framework that is relevant to all types of community contexts within our region. We are conducting comprehensive analysis on our member government's zoning codes, development ordinances, development patterns, how they relate to their own comprehensive plans. We are also ensuring alignment with existing DRCOG tools. Think of our Complete Streets toolkit. So we align our own typology approach with the one that contains in that toolkit as well. So using the data that we've collected, we are putting together different case studies of successful multimodal developments around the region to learn from our peers what is working and also what is not. Most of this will take place through direct engagement with our local community staff in focus groups, and this will help us develop some key takeaways on different development approaches that are already being implemented across our own region. And finally, a major outcome of this project will provide a range of context-sensitive design and development standards that our member governments can use or at least reference in practice. So these tools, you can consider them templates, case studies, and just general guidance, will help us achieve better outcomes when we are developing multimodal and accessible places across our region. What I really wanted to talk to you guys this evening about is different opportunities coming up to participate and stay engaged in this project, whether you are a staff member, elected official, et cetera. We want this toolkit to actually, as I've said, actually be relevant and helpful for staff at the local level, and not just, as some plans do, sit on a shelf after we've created it. And that's why we are conducting multiple focus groups with local government staff. We've grouped them into 4 different community characteristic groups or typologies that we can get feedback from as many different member governments as possible and make this toolkit as applicable as possible to those environments. We're also later in this project conducting a developer roundtable where member governments can engage directly with developers from across the region to discuss common challenges, have a knowledge sharing opportunity, and identify future opportunities to collaborate as well. Again, we want this toolkit to be as relevant and as useful as possible for our partners. And so the engagement approach in this is a very important component that we are getting underway currently. That leads me into our project timeline. Here's a couple parts of this slide that I want you guys to pay a little additional attention to. Let's see, draft corridor context, sorry, it's late. That is a component where we are reaching out to different communities in those 4 groups that I mentioned before that will take place in the focus group. The focus groups going forward, those will take place in November. They will start next month, and we will be doing at least 3 of those per group. So if a community is interested in participating in this, that is a good opportunity to get started on that as well. The developer roundtable, we have our timeline there between October 2025 and April 2026. That is just as quickly as we can schedule it. And that is something, whether you want to sit in or actively participate in that as well, that is something that we highly encourage you engaging with me to go ahead and be able to participate in that going forward. And keep an eye out too, we will be doing another midpoint project update to you guys with this as well. But then the actual implementation of this toolkit, whether it's establishing coordinating roles with our own staff at DRCOG, and then how to distribute this toolkit and make it as useful as possible, and so government staff and elected officials are understanding how to use it as well. That will take place at the end of 2025 through July 2026 at the end of the project. So with that, thank you.
Questions? All right, I saw Director Flynn and then Director Normella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Cole. I really appreciate that on slide 7 that you talk about the different contexts, the different land use contexts or zoning contexts. I would encourage you to continue to dig down into those contexts, because in Denver, our zoning code has several urban contexts. You know, urban, we have downtown urban, general urban, urban edge, and suburban contexts, just to drill down and recognize the different characters and needs of those different neighborhood types that make a diverse city capable of attracting a diverse type of house. I also want to point out that it freaked me out, the image you had on there, the guy with the nail gun. I couldn't figure out, it looked like he was floating in air. And he's next to the ladder, and I couldn't understand how he was doing this. Did he nail himself to the building?
I'm afraid to touch this now.
I was mesmerized by it.
So if we could go back.
He's got one hand on the ladder.
Yeah, I know. Thank you. We will, for any future presentations, we will omit that specific slide. Appreciate that.
Director Normella.
Sorry, I've been talking a lot tonight, but I'm really excited about this. And I just, having worked for 3 different cities, 3 very different contexts, Denver, Westminster, and now Erie, I have definitely struggled to implement very multimodal friendly development based on the different contexts. And I would say, sorry, I can't see you. Something that I would actually focus on is it's not just the land use codes. What I run into on a daily basis are the engineers, not to throw them under a multimodal bus, but I will. So engineering and street standards are something that is kind of the bane to my existence as a land use professional. And I would hope that you can actually focus on how to tackle that. And I would say with respect to certain engineering contexts, you often have very limited access requirements. And so while we're trying to create these new developments that are pedestrian and bicycle friendly, the access points that are allowed end up kind of serving vehicles more, and that vehicle and the speeds as well. Actually, Erie just very recently slowed speeds on arterials, which I was very excited about and was part of, because I want us to not be slave to the vehicle and to the engineering standards. So if you could incorporate that, and also Director Pakba, CDOT is also something that does impact communities with access control and the ability to create more multimodal friendly development along CDOT arterials and corridors. And so working with CDOT as well would be really important. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to kind of answer that as well, we do have CDOT actively involved in the project going forward. To that end, as communities continue to participate in these focus groups, it is not a one staff member representation. If you have additional staff members, if your engineer wants to show up, if you have code enforcement, those who go, staff who go through the permitting process as well, I'm just throwing out examples. We want to see, because this is an incredibly complicated issue that I know we all experience kind of a little bit in different contexts. And so if you want that representation there, we actually prefer it going forward.
Director Ward. Thank you, Chair. Kind of building off of Director Namella, one of the things when we do or hear developments that are attempting to be more or really more multimodal focused and less car dependent is there's always the fire department loves to throw a wrench in the system. And so I'm curious if in these focus groups or discussions you're having, if you're incorporating or kind of bringing them to the table so that way we can holistically address that issue, knowing that obviously like entities like Westminster and Thornton have their own fire departments in-house, whereas like the city and county of Broomfield, North Glen rely on a fire district. North Metro Fire in our case, there's obviously South Metro Fire in that case. So it's a completely separate governmental entity. So just curious your take on addressing that issue.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be an ongoing issue with the entire project that we're going to have to address, is how many people we involve within this project and still make it relevant for certain components. So if we're fixing 3 very specific issues, for example, on this overarching topic, I think that that would be a good starting point, but it's something that we don't want too many people in the room so we have scope creep on the overall project. All that to say, it's not that we don't want to invite them or have them at the table. We most definitely do. It's just something that we're going to have to continuously evaluate as the project goes forward. Like I said, we haven't started on the focus groups yet. So if there's one section of the focus groups that is focused on certain topics, and then going forward, we feel like we need additional voices in the room, like for example, fire department representatives, then absolutely we're going to do that.
Okay, and maybe, I won't say they shouldn't be involved, but maybe also as part of the toolkit, you develop a framework of how to interact with the fire department about, changes, recommended changes to engineering standards and building codes. So that way we are still ensuring public safety, but we're also addressing the fact that building a more multimodal, denser communities, and that's going to look different for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Director Kondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you, Director Ward. I appreciate that comment about the fire district. My question for you is, hopefully you're not just creating this from scratch, but you're looking at other COGs that already have a toolkit, or for that matter, looking at other communities that have said toolkit. Can you comment on that?
Yes, so as part of our best practices report that we're putting together on this, and when we do have that memo finalized and ready to go, we can share it with this group as well. That is what we're looking at. So we're looking at specific case studies within the region and what's gone right and what hasn't. And then we're taking those we're taking them to local governments and asking them to comment on them within the focus groups as well. With that being said, I'm sorry, can you repeat the second part of your question again?
Yeah, really, my question is, have we looked at other COGs or communities that have a toolkit so that we're not, hopefully not creating from scratch, we're benefiting from the lessons learned of other COGs or communities that have kind of gone before?
Absolutely. So while we were scoping this project out and putting together a project timeline, we did look at similar toolkits that different COGs have put together, and that is something that we've been directed to do as part of the project team as well, and part of our research is looking for similar toolkits. We have not found a one-for-one, but we were not expecting to find a one-for-one either. Our region is unique, just as every region is as well. But we do find helpful components from other COGs and other local governments, not only within our region, but across the country as well.
Director Kern.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, and I appreciate everyone's comments, and Director Ward for noting the complications that can come with planning, especially intersections around the fire department needs. ultimately for the community's need. But I want to make sure that I like this idea of consistency. You know, in Louisville, we're facing, and I think a lot of everyone else is too, the challenges around e-bikes as a new mode of transportation, and more specifically for children, people like under the age of 16 who have no concept of the rules of the road, there are no consistent regulations statewide. I mean, obviously I'm opening a can of worms, but I see a lot of heads nodding. I think everyone agrees we need bigger, broader conversation. I would love, though, to make sure that this is maybe something that can be included in this, whether it's from the traffic things. I mean, I come down here to Denver and I see a traffic light, a pedestrian crossing, and this cute little bicycle crossing. And then I watch the people on the electric scooters who go, which one of those is for me? And they just do whatever they want as I'm waiting to turn left to come into DRCOG. And so where that I go with this is the consistency that we're talking about is everybody understands what we do in every town. It's the same. We don't put hawk lights in some places and yellow beacons that actually do mean stop, not caution. And so we need the consistency so that when somebody from Louisville goes to Erie, they know what's happening. And I'm hoping that that's the purpose or one of the biggest benefits of this toolkit.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that at a high level of that we don't want to be prescriptive and go into this entire project thinking that we already know what is exactly is going to come out of it, whether it's templates, just blanket recommendations, context-sensitive solutions, all those kind of aspects. That's what's important about the engagement portion of this. So again, I heavily stress to everyone that the focus groups for these specific, this specific project would be incredibly helpful to hear that kind of feedback going forward.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question and gives me an opportunity to just plug that one of the other things that's about to come before you at your December meeting is our updated active transportation plan. So specifically when we start talking about some of those specific treatments and some of those facilities that you're mentioning, we actually address those in great detail in terms of best practices and consistency across the region in the active transportation plan. So you'll see that coming too. Thank you.
Director Cruz.
Clearly, the discussion shows that we're all very excited to participate in your focus groups and in this process. So really excited to think about it. I guess to the question of scope, is this really like just about the land use, like what is in our zoning codes and those pieces? Or is it also in scope thinking about some of the other like funding tools like URAs, working with our bids, like other pieces? Because that's frankly like in some of the areas where on paper we could have these beautiful crossings and all of those things, right? It's just not developed in that way yet. And so just trying to think about in how to prepare for this process, understanding whether that's in scope.
It's definitely mostly focused on development ordinances, somewhat of a land use code, the relationship to comprehensive plans, and then the relationship to how we build out our transportation network as well.
Thank you. Okay, that's helpful. And then just my second question, are there case studies of other cities, I see like a picture from Boston, like where there is this same dynamic of like cities where there's state highways that are our main corridors? Because I just kind of double tapping on that point, that is our biggest challenge as the city of Lakewood and thinking about these multimodal commercial areas. So if there's any other contexts that have dealt with this successfully, that would be really helpful to understand.
Absolutely. So that's one thing where we're not just limiting ourselves to regional in scope for that portion of the project task. We're going to expand beyond and try to locate best practices and studies on those across the country and what has worked. Yes.
Director Pagpas.
To quickly answer Director Cruz's question, it varies depending on what state you're looking at throughout the country. I'm sure Cole is going to do a fantastic job in coming up with some peer agencies to look at. But for example, if you live in Virginia, the state DOT controls all the roads, which is I don't know how they do that in there, but yes, but it's interesting. So it varies on there. So there's a plethora. Western states, it tends to be those main arterials.
Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cruz, just to further elaborate on your question related to funding strategies and the like, I don't think there's anything specifically within the toolkit, but within the Regional Active Transportation Plan, I believe there's an element that talks about possible funding strategies. So stay tuned for that. Getting thumbs up from Jacob, so I must have said something right.
Okay.
I think it was his thumb.
All righty. Director Coombs.
Thank you. So these may be more active transportation plan questions, but in areas where the arterials are maybe not state highways, but are kind of designed like them, like we have in Aurora, are there any sections on kind of converting the roads, as it were, more accessible roads? And then this, I know, is probably almost certainly an active transportation question, which is, I know Littleton has done some bike skills park setups, and Aurora is preparing to do those. So in answer to the question about how do you learn the rules of the road, having bike skills parks and part of the conversation.
Definitely. So this is going to be primarily focused on new development, and portions of it will be inevitably come to the topic of the challenges of redeveloping corridors like that as well. With that being said, I think that we have other resources at DRCOG that focus a little more specifically on that too, and I'm going to let Jacob answer this right after so he can say the opposite of what I just said. But that's all to speak to the importance of the typologies that we're creating in this too, and making sure that they align with the existing toolkits and resources that we have. And then exploring the major component of this project, exploring how DRCOG staff can understand these toolkits and then distribute them and make them as helpful as possible in a capacity building manner to local governments. I know that's only a high level answer for your question, but I'll let Jacob finish it too.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, Cole's spot on. It's a really good question, and Cole's answer is spot on. I just want to build on the last point that he made. I know it feels like overwhelming. We do a lot of planning at DRCOG. What we're actually trying to do is make all these plans work together and fit together. So yes, in our upcoming active transportation plan, one of the things you're going to see is something called the sidewalk delivery guide, bicycle delivery guide, that goes into some of those details. Doug was right as well about funding, design, how to make those things work. In our regional Complete Streets toolkit, we actually spend a lot of time, to your very point, about some of those different design options and standards. Again, from a toolkit and resource, not a directive perspective, but just, if you've got this situation, if you've got this context, how can we make this work? So the point is that whether it's regional Complete Streets, whether it's active transportation plan, whether it's built to move, we want all these plans to work together to deliver that consistent message on tools that we can deliver, resources, information, data, tools, opportunities for you to do what is best in your communities.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised. So Cole, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I will urge everyone to take a look at the informational items that are listed 14 and 15 in your packet, and we'll move on to committee reports, which I am going to say have to be brief and reflect decisions made and information. DRCOG. So first one is report from the state STAC. Director Ward.
Thank you, Chair. It is a brief memo. STAC did not meet in October, but September 4th, STAC did meet. There were three major things. STAC recommended the adoption of CDOT's 2050 statewide transportation plan. We received a presentation from CDOT staff on the agency's Fixing Rural Roads and Poor Interstates initiatives, which focus on pavement and state of good repair activities on the state's rural roads and interstates, as well as received a presentation from CDOT staff on the agency's strategic highway safety plan, which is updated every 5 years. And that is my presentation.
Thank you very much. We have a report from the Metro Mayor's Caucus. Director Starker.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Metro Mayor's Caucus met on October the 1st. We had a presentation on cybersecurity awareness. I would suggest that you save your Etch-a-Sketch, and that's about the only way to be safe in today's environment. We had a download on Proposition 123 funding by Brian Rossert with Housing Colorado. We had a DRCOG housing study update by our very own Sheila Lynch at DRCOG, very interesting, and a land use discussion with the Metro Mayor's Caucus, DRCOG, Colorado Counties, Inc., CML, and Colorado Concern. And if I may take a moment of personal privilege, this is my last meeting at DRCOG. I want to thank you all and the board and the staff of DRCOG for really having a very interesting 8-year tour here. I've learned much more than I've been able to contribute, but I thank you all for your courtesy.
Thank you, Mayor Starker. We have no report from MAC, so report from the Advisory Committee on Aging, Jayla Sanchez-Warren.
Regulations, we talked about the Ride Alliance project, but I want to highlight the one thing that we talked about that I think is incredibly important. And we got an update from the Ombudsman program. Remember, this is the program that protects the rights, the health, safety, welfare, and rights of people that live in our more than 500 nursing homes and assisted living facilities. We heard about issues. It's largely related to staffing. A lot of care issues, a lot of medication mistakes, bathing, pressure sores, et cetera. We're seeing trends of having, when you think of nursing homes, you think of older adults, maybe cognitively impaired older adults, right? We're seeing a lot younger population in nursing homes, being placed in nursing homes. People who have behavioral issues, mental health, and addiction issues. And that mixed with the general population of the older adults is an area for conflict that the ombudsman get brought into a lot. We also have noticed a pattern recently, like in the last maybe year, where prisoners, the prison system is paying nursing homes to care for prisoners that have long sentences and have aged out of the prison system. The prison can't take care of them anymore because they have too many healthcare needs. So they place them in secured units of nursing homes. And as the board members that are on the advisory committee will attest, our lead ombudsman was telling some pretty horrifying stories of violence that the staff are not able to deal with the prisoners population, and then violence against the general population of residents in nursing homes. So that was a big eye opener and a concerning pattern of practice here in the region. Thanks.
Thank you, Jayla. Regional Air Quality, Executive Director Rex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. The Regional Air Quality Council met on October 3rd, and a couple of items of note. First of all, we welcome Judy Kern as one of a recently new member of RAC, so we thank you very much for your service on that board. So we continue conversations about the draft control strategy blueprints, but what I really wanted to highlight to you all, and you might have seen the article in the paper about this, about we had a presentation by staff on the ozone season, just a review of the season. It is the first clean year that we've had since 2009 for the 2008 standard of 75 parts per billion. So that is wonderful news. You know, we'd like to take all the credit for that, but we know that there's obviously weather plays a very big role in that, but it's good to get a good year under our belt, so at least it helps us with momentum going forward. Now the 2015 standard of 70 parts per billion are 75 parts per billion, not so much. So, but we had a wonderful year, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, E470, Director Mulvey.
Hi, it was a busy week for E470, so I'm going to just highlight. There was a budget workshop where the strategic plan was really the focus, and the big highlights there were focused on customer service and bringing contract work in-house. The next big item had to do with the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Toll Association Conference. And there, the primary focus was interoperability, which means using your pass in another state, which make it easier to drive across the country if you like to do that. And then also the concept of users paying for a toll road, because a lot of people don't know that E470 is actually a user-funded toll road, not a government-funded toll road, as distinguished from the other CTIO-based tolls that you have around the Denver metro region, like I-70 and Northwest Parkway. And so climate change solutions, most folks believe, especially in Europe, that those should be addressed through users of the tollway roads through those tolls, rather than by governmental budgets. So that's an interesting topic. The other thing I want to highlight is that E470's Kyle Saiki, and I may be mispronouncing that, received an award for his IT response to a big cyber tech event in collaboration with 3 other agencies. And I think I highlighted his contributions previously on some interesting phishing issues. So we just are really well protected, and that is good to know. So that is it.
Thank you very much. CDOT, Darius?
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. The Transportation Commission was on the road. They're going to meet in Glenwood Springs. They took the Denver Zephyr, which is mirroring the proposed mountain rail. They're mostly going to be taking a look at the FY27 budget for next year for CDOT, and that will be it. The other plug is it's starting to get closer to winter, so be on the lookout for those snow plows as they'll come out, probably in the mountains now, but soon it will be in the Denver area, no doubt in the near future. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. RTD, Bill?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things. One thing to update people on the downtown rail replacement project. The first phase of that, there was an 86-day project, which is going to be impacting the Calamus section of the rail line by Auraria. Just to note, anybody traveling downtown, that Calamus will be closed starting this Sunday for a week while we do some track work in that section. The expectation is that we will be done with that by Thanksgiving, crossing our fingers, and then it will be back open. The central corridor will be back open to the public. Also, many of you know that last week, I believe it was last week, we had the opening of the 16th Street, not 16th Street Mall anymore, it's 16th Street. So that, you know, and our shuttles are running. They have been running up and down the mall, and so we're excited about getting that service back in place. It's kind of been disrupted for quite a while.
Excellent, thank you. Just a reminder, our next meeting is November 5th. If you haven't already filled out the survey online for Executive Director Rex performance evaluation, please do that. Are there any other members, matters that members would like to bring up? All right, thank you. We are adjourned.